Studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Welcome to Contract Transparency in Mining, Opportunities and Challenges for Zimbabwe. Hello, I'm Andy Hodges. This broadcast is brought to you by Zimpapers TV Network ZTN and our partners, Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ. Now, as usual, should you have any comments or views on our show this afternoon, please contact us via our Facebook page, Zimpapers TV Network, or via our Twitter handle @ZTN News. What is contract transparency in the mining sector and why is it important? Why should it matter? Should agreements signed in the sector as alleged be shrouded in secrecy? Why is transparency and accountability important, and can the fight against corruption or leakages in the sector be won? With over 40 minerals consisting of precious metals, base metals, industrial metals and gemstones, Zimbabwe has some of the most diverse and profitable minerals on the African continent. Research done by various civil society organizations, the academia and other stakeholders has confirmed that through leakages, the country lost huge potential resources which could have been utilized for development purposes. There's no doubt that revenue losses from the formal system have had negative consequences on Zimbabwe's social and economic development. There appears to be need to improve on the legal and institutional frameworks that relate to public finance management and natural resources governance to ensure transparency and accountability. Joining us on the program this afternoon to discuss contract transparency in mining, opportunities and challenges for Zimbabwe are Honourable Edmund Mukaratigwa, Member of Parliament for Shirugwi South and Parliamentary Chairperson of the Mines and Mining Development Committee, and Tafazwa Chikumbu, Head of Programs at Transparency International Zimbabwe. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And joining us virtually during the program is Joyce Machiri, Coordinator, Publish What You Pay Zimbabwe, PWYP. So Tafazwa, let me start with you. What is contract transparency and why is it important to mining communities, the government of Zimbabwe, and in fact mining companies themselves?
Okay, when you talk about contract transparency, we are saying that the government should have provisions to ensure that the contents of the contracts are made public. So we are actually referring to contract disclosure, where the citizens have access to the contents of the contract that the government enters into with the mining companies. I think today we are basically talking about mining, but this is a basic principle, a basic good principle in terms of good governance across contracts, not just in the mining sector, but also even including in procurement, in public procurement. So all government contracts, irrespective of the sector, should be made public and available to the citizens. Advantages of disclosing contracts to the citizens is to ensure that the citizens, they know what obtains in those contracts. I think by its very nature, a contract contains the obligations of both parties that are in that particular contract, and in this case will be the government and also the mining company itself. So when citizens have information with regard to the obligation of the state in the mining contract, and also the obligations of the mining company in relation to the economic, the social and the environmental implications of mining to communities. Of course, the communities will be in a position to hold both the government and the private sector to account, especially for non-compliance. And at the same time, when the communities actually have access to the contracts, they can also be in a position to ask questions, especially to the government, to ensure that the mining communities actually adhere to the terms of those conditions. I think for mining companies to operate in a given community, they should actually get what they call a social license to operate, where the community actually gives the go-ahead to the mining company to operate, having met the environmental impact assessments, having met the human rights impact assessments that are a key requirement in most countries, including Zimbabwe. So with all that information, it helps them actually to hold them to account, but at the same time to ensure that they also benefit from the sector itself. Then when it comes to government, when they disclose mining contracts, it also removes the public mistrust that normally exists, where citizens say, in these particular mega deals, what is the government offering to them, especially in relation to the tax incentives, especially those that relate to a company from a country that has a double taxation agreement with Zimbabwe. We actually need to understand what is in it. It builds public trust in the state. Unless in a situation where the government is actually operating in secrecy, where there's opacity, citizens who tend to speculate, and in the presence of such information, actually citizens will have trust in the government. But also, I think private sector, it also helps them in terms of removing the risk profile, especially when they're operating in conflict zones. So when information is made available to the public, it also builds their worthiness, and also even the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other financial institutions, they also consider transparency and accountability as one of the key governance frameworks, which actually helps them to give financial support to the mining companies.
Edmund, I want to pick up something on what Tafazwa said there. I mean, about contract disclosure and transparency. I mean, it also allows for comparison of different contracts. This can create a more level playing field and also enable governments to negotiate better deals. I want to ask you a two-part question here. Firstly, does the current Zimbabwe mining legal framework actually provide for contract transparency? And also, some feel that a multi-stakeholder approach in amending the new Mines and Minerals Act, which I believe is maybe even in front of your committee as we speak, could enhance this issue. Has there been that type of consultation in terms of the new Mines and Minerals Act? And can you ensure that if there is submissions, that these views are taken on board?
Thank you very much. Does the current Zimbabwe mining law framework provide for contract transparency? The answer is yes.
It's yes.
But not exactly.
Ah, right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Not exactly in the Mines and Minerals Act, but there are other government procedural and administrative legal frameworks for transparency and accountability, such as the public procurement guidelines and the procurement board infrastructure. And in every contract, you have parties. The parties can be individuals, they can be companies, they can be NPOs, it can be the government. And where companies are concerned, we have got the Companies Act. And the Companies Act provides for beneficial ownership. And this allows for disclosure of who owns what.
So are you saying, Edmund, that there are laws in place that whereby the government should disclose publicly the type of mining contracts or the deals that they're signing with investors? Are those actually in place? And if they are, then why is that not actually happening?
There's as of now, there's no provisions in the Mines and Minerals Act. But we are gravitating towards that. There is probably indication, for example, the Minister of Finance in the 2018-2019 budget statement, he had formal pronouncement that their intentions may be to consider joining EITI.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
okay.
Which is an initiative which advocates for transparency and accountability.
Right.
So an indicator has been...
At least the line has been drawn in the sand that this is what government intends to do. Now we have to take a breather, but Tavazo, maybe you could have a quick comment on what the Honourable has said.
Yeah, I think the Honourable said, I think in relation to transparency and accountability, there are so many frameworks, including the Constitution itself, which specifies that the government or public officers should always act in a transparent and accountable manner at all times, especially to safeguard public resources. And we also have Section 327 of our Constitution, which specifies that I think the government might not enter into any a contract without going through Parliament, in which case it means the Parliament should have access to certain contracts to ensure that they make a decision whether to enter into a contract or not. But I think the challenge, especially with the mining sector, is that it's a sector which is generally shrouded in secrecy, a sector that is not usually made public. And in some cases where information is made public, they also contain public disclosure clauses. The disclosure clauses, which says there's certain information which should be made secret, which should just be known between the government and the mining company itself.
In fact, hold that thought, because I am going to come back to this, because I think it's a very critical point about this secrecy issue in mining contracts. But we will have to take a breather now. If you have any comments or views on our show this afternoon, please contact us via our Facebook page, Zim Papers TV Network, or via our Twitter handle @ZTN News. You're watching Contract Transparency in Mining, Opportunities and Challenges for Zimbabwe. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ. In our next segment, we explore further this issue of mining contracts being kept secret, but we'll also be joined by Joyce Machiri, Coordinator, Publish What You Pay Zimbabwe. We further ask, what are the challenges inhibiting contract disclosure in the mining sector, and would contract transparency reduce the incidence of corruption? Don't go away, we will be right back.
Coronavirus is a threat to all humanity. It has killed over 350,000 people so far, and many others are in quarantine away from their loved ones. We are fortunate to be alive, but no one knows how and when the virus will strike closer to home. You and I are each other's keeper. With winter upon us, let's ensure that none of us will be exposed to the elements that make us vulnerable to COVID-19. Let's help those in need by contributing to the Zim Papers COVID-19 Fund. The proceeds will go towards equipping underdeveloped health centers and communities. To contribute, dial or SMS the following numbers on your screen. Remember, if we stand together, we win together.
Welcome back. You're watching Contract Transparency in Mining, Opportunities and Challenges for Zimbabwe. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ. Now, as usual, any comments or views you may have on our show this afternoon, please contact us via our Facebook page, Zim Papers TV Network, or via our Twitter handle @ZTN News. Now, before the breather, we were entering into something which I think is critical that we talk about, Edmund. Now, while treaties, laws, regulations, and other legal documents defining relationships between government and the private sector are public documents, why are mining contracts between government and the extractive industries shrouded in secrecy?
Concerns around mining contracts, public disclosure are fairly new, and the legal framework globally are slowly responding to that. As a result, it is not necessarily that they are shrouded, but that has been the prevailing practice. Further, international and domestic laws are public as they regulate the public, international and national behaviors, and to some extent giving away national sovereignty. Yet public contracts regulate both public and private property. You should note the difference here. That is one side of the challenge in the mining sector. And second, another view is aligned to the utilitarian perspective, given broadness of the state overall mandate.
But
By this, what I mean is, the state, I think if you recall the agency theory, office bearers, they are acting in government on behalf of the people, on behalf of communities. And communities have various expectations, broad expectations. They do have a way of living, a way of checks and balances. And this is a new approach which is globally acceptable. But our communities, when you look at the globe, are probably prioritizing other things, call it bread and butter issues. So the speed at which we actually get to prioritize maybe issues of transparency and accountability, it depends on what are we talking about. Transparency to who?
Well, I mean, yeah, but Edmund, if you say that the representatives in Parliament, as you quite rightly said, and in government, represent the people of Zimbabwe, surely your committee, it would behove your committee to try and make those sort of that sort of information publicly available, so that there isn't this perception that it's shrouded in secrecy and there's something underhand happening in it, because there probably isn't. But maybe people would want to know and want to examine it. What would you say to that?
I'm agreeing with you. It's a way of life. Let's agree first. This is how we've been living.
Okay.
And in terms of our priorities, it has not been a priority. Maybe what comes to mind is the issue of trust. Social contract that you talked about. Yes, confidence. Confidence between the people, the government, the other stakeholders, the mining companies, whoever is involved in extracting.
Okay.
But as an agent of the people, the office bearers in government, they are concerned with utilitarian aspects. That is to balance between pain and pleasure, the expectations of the majority.
All right, we'll carry this on because I think that Fazo has some comments there. But we're now joined virtually by Joyce Machiri. She's a coordinator, Publish What You Pay Zimbabwe, PWYP. Joyce, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, Joyce, PWYP Zimbabwe was founded around the need to promote and protect the political, economic, social, environmental, and cultural rights of communities affected by extraction. So what is your opinion on transparency and accountability in mineral resource governance? Is it important?
Thank you for that. And thank you for that background on why Publish What You Pay was formed. Transparency and accountability is very important, especially when we look at promoting the rights of communities who are living in the mining communities. The Constitution, it actually says that the communities need to benefit from the mining resources in their areas. But walking around Zimbabwe, in all of, if not all of them, the mining communities, there is just the negative impacts of mining. You can't really point to this and say that this is as a result of mining, and you can't really find a community member who is really happy and have their rights being upheld, being promoted by either, the mining companies and the structures within our country. So transparency and accountability is important because this it actually improves issues of revenue collection for improved service delivery. Let's talk about COVID. Right now, look at the impacts that have been caused by COVID. All the health sectors in the mining communities, they are actually redundant, and most of them, they are not working, they do not have resources. But we do have minerals that are being mined every day, revenue is being collected every day. And we have talked about revenue sharing. And this is not transparent, it's not open. No one knows about how this money is being used for the benefit of the people, because these are resources for the people. But no one knows how these resources or the revenue is being used.
So, Joyce, that actually takes me to my next question. And I did ask Honorable Mukaratigwa this just before you. I mean, why then does it appear that mining contracts between the government and extractive industry players are shrouded in secrecy? Just going from what you've said, revenue sharing, community benefiting from mining operations in their neighborhood, surely their ability to understand what's in the contracts will assist those sort of issues.
So the challenge we have is our weak legal framework. You find that there is not really a legal requirement that requires us to really publicize the mining contracts. Because we have the Official Secrecy Act, which really protects these investors, the mining investors. So it's not really out in the open, and we can't really say, let's have the mining contract, unless maybe someone has proved as a way of exercising your right that you can be given the contract. So the challenge is our weak legal framework, and that this is not open for everyone just to see the contracts. So this is why all the deals are shrouded in secrets, because we have this Official Secrets Act that is protecting and promoting the secrecy in the contracts that are being signed.
But I mean, obviously, these are commercial contracts, so I assume that the Official Secrets Act more relates to secrets of the state. So are you saying that the government considers mining contracts to be official secrets? Is that what you're saying?
So what I'm just alluding to is the issue to say why we are not having these, the contracts in the open. This is one law, one act that is being also used to protect the contracts. Because me or you as a person, you can't go and get this contract unless you have proof that you are exercising a right or why you really want that contract. That's why they are not out in the open.
Okay, all right. So let's move to my next question. Now, your coalition has focused much of an effort on improving mining legislation. So what are the emerging issues and best practices in contract transparency that are being practiced around the world?
One best practice, and what we have been calling for as a coalition is Publish What You Pay, is the need to adopt and domesticate some initiatives that promote transparency and accountability. This includes the EITI. So you find that EITI already, it has some sections or some things that it has that talks about issues of revenue transparency, contract transparency, and all. And this is not new to us as a nation, as Zimbabwe, because this is embedded in our own constitution of Zimbabwe, where we have the principles that uphold transparency and accountability. So this is not a new thing, but we just need to domesticate this and ensure that as we review our laws, we have a lot of work to do to align our laws and policies in line with the Constitution. So,
okay. So Joyce, finally and briefly, would or could contract transparency reduce the incidences of corruption in the mining sector?
Definitely, this will reduce the incidences of corruption, because you deal with disparities that expose the issues of, rent-seeking behavior, because this is out in the open and it's clear, and it improves quite a number of issues. And you find that also you can easily hold a company to account. You can easily hold government to account, because you know what is in the contract. Let's talk about the issues of EIAs. They are required to do the EIAs, but no one really knows what's happening in the contract. We don't even have access to the EIAs. Now the communities, they can't even hold the companies to account of their actions in the mining communities, because these documents are not transparent, and issues of accountability now comes into play.
Joyce Machiri, Coordinator, Publish What You Pay Zimbabwe, PWYP, thank you very much for participating on our program today.
Thank you.
Now, Honourable, I want to just highlight a couple of issues there that you talked about. Interesting. The Constitution states that communities must benefit from the mining activities in their areas, and that appears, according to Joyce, that doesn't seem to be happening. Also, issues such as revenue sharing, and as Tafazwa highlighted before the breather, how the communities benefit from mining operations. But one and two other issues: weak legal framework. She said that was one of the reasons why. I think, and you alluded to that in terms of the secrecy of the mining contracts. But another thing which maybe you could clarify. She said that one of the reasons why these contracts are not being publicly available is because they're covered under the Official Secrets Act. Maybe a comment from you, Edward.
The Official Secrets Act, yes, and also in general business, commercial terms, we have got when we first meet for the first time, obviously, I may not know you. I may know you, but I don't know much about you. I must do due diligence. Before I do that, we should have a starting point. And usually the starting point is a non-disclosure, a non-circumvention agreement, which is almost an analogy of when government business is being done. They are official secrets aspects, and the officers must be protected.
But you have a balancing act here, don't you? You have a balancing act between protecting the commercial rights of the contract and doing what you're elected to be, which is representing the rights of the people. So the people also have a right to know. So how do you balance it? It's quite a balancing act you have to play, I would assume.
That's what I'm talking about. It's quite a balancing act. But like I alluded to earlier on, the government is preoccupied with, they look at priorities.
Okay.
That's right. So in terms of priorities, from where we are coming from, what might be a priority in America, Britain, and any other European country is different from what we prioritize back home.
Okay.
What people want to know, the communities, is probably different. So as you approach utilitarian principles, you must be able to figure out what people value most, what their priorities are, and those are the ones that you attack for first. When you do that, it doesn't mean you do not embrace transparency and accountability. Maybe sometime back, if I take you back,
unfortunately, we have to take a breather. So hold that thought, Honourable. And we have to take a breather now. You're watching Contract Transparency in Mining, Opportunities and Challenges for Zimbabwe. After the breather, of course, we'll have a comment from Tafazwa Chikumbu from Transparency International Zimbabwe. This broadcast is brought to you by Zimpaper's TV network ZTN and our partners, Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ. In our final segment, we ask, what is the role of Zimbabwe's parliament and contract transparency in Zimbabwe? And are they doing enough? And how to curtail corruption, and is Parliament doing enough to ensure transparency and accountability in the mining sector? Don't go away, we will be right back.
Life will never be the same again.
Absolutely. No. How do you tell someone in Mbaria or in Soweto that they should exercise social distancing?
Every single one of us, barring a few, are praying more.
What is the health economic cost of what we are trying to achieve?
I don't know whether his chairman knows he runs at about 9 in the morning.
Yeah, I've just got the symptoms, so I just called the doctor and and then he just advised me to have to stay at home, eh?
Welcome back. You're watching Contract Transparency in Mining, Opportunities and Challenges for Zimbabwe. This broadcast is brought to you by Zimpaper's TV network, ZTN, and our partners, Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ. Tafazo, there's a lot for you to unpack, and unfortunately you don't have a lot of time to do it, but I just want to recap quickly what Joyce Machivi said from Publish What You Pay Zimbabwe. She talked about constitutional, communities must benefit from mining programs, talked about weak legal framework, which is probably why contracts are enshrouded in secrecy, and also, of course, sometimes the Official Secrets Act is utilized so that these contracts cannot be published, into the public. So maybe you can comment on that. But I also want you to talk about one issue which is important: is how contract transparency is it possible for it to reduce the incidence of corruption in the mining sector? Okay,
I think, Andy, I want to mention that mineral resources, they are part of public resources. And public resources, the only difference is that it's capital underground, which needs to be extracted, which then qualifies any information with regard to public resources to be made available to the public. Then the second issue is about the three key actors in mining, which is the government, the private sector or the mining company, and the communities. And these three groups of people, they have different expectations, which needs to be managed. And the only basic way of managing their expectations is to ensure that they equally have access to information with regard to mining in their community, in the country, and also that the company knows what is happening in different communities. And how do we do that? It's by ensuring that we also disclose some of the conditions in the mining contract. One of the key issues is around local content development. Most of the conflicts that exist between the mining company, the communities, and the government is lack of information with regard to the local content development policy in their own respective areas, which is usually covered in the mining contract. So you begin to hear people asking, what is our quota in terms of employment?
How are we benefiting from this?
How are we benefiting from the minerals? And that should be made public so that we reduce those conflicts between the government and its people. And for your own information, Andy, the government retains the responsibility over the rights of citizens in terms of fulfillment of their rights, promotion of their rights, and also the protection of their rights. Because most of the mining companies, they engage in mining practices which are actually causing environmental challenges to our citizens, both physically to them or either physically to their own livelihoods, sources of livelihood.
So let's link this now to corruption and how this contract transparency can help reduce corruption. And Edwin, I'm going to ask you the same question because I think this is a critical aspect of our society in general as we speak in Zimbabwe now.
Yeah, so corruption thrives where there's secrecy. When you don't know the kind of agreement that I am in on behalf of the citizens with a mining company, it breeds corruption. So what we need is for citizens to remove the speculation, because if information is not made available, I begin to speculate that probably a contract has been manipulated to benefit someone because someone is getting a kickback. So there are certain basic principles internationally that should be followed in terms of contract development, which citizens should actually follow and know that they've been followed.
And you believe that will hopefully start reducing the corrupt practices. Exactly. Edmund, I want to throw this at you because obviously corruption is a huge factor in most society, most sectors, and mining is no different. So can contract transparency help reduce corruption, incidents of corruption in the mining sector? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, to a great extent help reduce corruption and manipulation, because this will ensure that contract awarding and execution will be done transparently. And as you know, there is always competition, and whoever is involved will be aware that they are watched, and the terms and conditions of a contract are known. Any deviation means you can be penalized.
And they'll be watched not by just government, by communities, by public stakeholders, by the community in general.
All stakeholders.
So,
yes.
so then, Edmund, then there's a little bit of a dichotomy. You said that government had priorities, but the way you answered the question, it would seem that contract transparency should be one of the top priorities, particularly for your committee.
This is why I say we are now gravitating towards that. This is why there was a pronouncement, is the 2018-2019 budget by the Minister of
So you're
Finance.
seized with it as a committee to see whether this can be put in place, hopefully.
As a committee, what we are saying is we must now talk about it. We must now debate. We must now educate even ourselves as members of parliament and office bearers in government and the communities and other stakeholders at large. We must now engage in serious debate to see the pros and cons. We must understand it. And
now, as we wait for that to happen, obviously your committee is vital here, because I would assume that your committee sees the contracts, I would hope, because you're obviously the parliamentary portfolio committee that looks at that. You would see the contract, you'd be able to inspect them and look at contract transparency in them. And so what is the role of Zimbabwe's parliament in this? And do you think parliament is doing enough, or if I can talk about your committee in particular and also Parliament, enough to ensure transparency and accountability in the sector?
You are right. Parliament has the prerogative to inspect contracts, but this has been post-awarding, not prior.
Right.
So the inspection is done after. So you have no say in how it's done.
Oh, I see. So if you disagree with the contract as the committee, you can't put suggestions to amend it, or it's already done? And
I'm referring to what has been happening.
Okay.
Because we need to do something to the laws, to align the laws. We then have to look at the trend, what has been the practice. The practice that is obtaining at the moment is Parliament is only involved in an oversight role after the contract
afterwards.
Yes, afterwards. So that limits.
So are you calling for you to be involved before, so that you actually, before things are signed, would that make sense for the Parliament or your committee in particular to look?
Not only, because when Parliament is involved, everyone is involved. The communities are also involved.
And they have a say in what's happening.
You can make recommendations, whether they are taken or not, but this is usually debate. Helps a lot.
It does. It stimulates good decisions.
So the main challenge is that to access the contracts, it has not been easy. Why? Because those involved may not see the need to share with Parliament, or may simply not be interested. This is what has been obtaining. In Parliament, also culture has been transforming. So when these aspects are requested, that has not been common, hence it raises different perceptions from the executive or from the ministries in general. So we must now debate and have convergence in terms of what needs to be done.
But as a member of Parliament, and obviously quite a powerful chairperson of quite a powerful committee in Parliament, I would assume that one of your goals would be to try and convince the executive, together with your other honourable members, to implement some of these transparent and accountable policies. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. And like I said, the Minister of Finance is part of the executive.
Exactly.
Yes. And he has put on the indicator.
So now you just have to push.
But what needs to be done is to push, to debate about it, and hopefully translate it into, if I may put it this way, a stronger law.
Thank you. We'll be watching your committee with interest. Now you've said that, Honourable. Tafazo, I want to, you heard the comments there from Edmund, but also do you think full contract disclosure, of course, will mitigate public mistrust? I think Edmund mentioned this, public mistrust, you did too, and confidence, not just in the government, in the contracts, in the mining sector, and also that the communities know they're getting their value from their resources, if I can call it that, in their community area.
Yeah, I think important points that have been raised by Honourable. I think it's good that he admitted that I think the current practice does not allow Parliament to have a say in terms of negotiation of the contract, and also at the same time when the contracts are availed to them, sometimes it's very difficult for them to get the contracts for scrutiny. But then with the calling in for extractive industry transparency initiative in Zimbabwe, I think this should actually be one of the key achievements in which Parliament also plays a critical role.
So are you saying that maybe you could come in there, Edmund? You're saying that sometimes your committee doesn't even get to see the contracts, even though you have to discuss them in your committee? Is that a true statement?
That's the obtaining.
That's the obtaining.
Practice.
So you may not even see the contracts even after they've been signed?
Precisely.
Okay, all right, sorry. Look, I just needed that clarification. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think with the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, it actually provides for contract transparency and actually public disclosure. And in the case of Ghana, when they adopted the EITI as a framework, they actually disclosed the 18 of their major oil and gas contracts on their online public registry, where citizens, if they want to view the contracts, they can actually go and see the terms of the contracts. And actually it helps in terms of the engagements. And this has been made a success because Parliament was working hand in hand with civil society and also with government. And for me, when the Minister of Finance pronounces the desire and commitment to join EITI, it's something that needs to be pursued. And I think it is the role of the portfolio committee to ensure that what has been committed is actually put into practice by the Minister of Mines. And
So I mean, we are coming to the end of our show, but I'd like to ask you both this, from civil society to Fadzwa. If you were sitting there, what recommendations would you make? Not just to Parliament, to government, particularly the Ministry of Mines and Mining Development as well, with regards to contract transparency. What recommendations would you push for?
The recommendations are there should be good governance in the management of natural resources, in which transparency, accountability, citizen participation are key. But I think as it obtains, this is not happening. And this can only be realized if you have a strong Mines and Minerals Act. I think we are already in the process of coming up with one. And I think according to commitments made so far by the ministry, I think we are supposed to have one before the end of the year. So we urge the Ministry of Mines and Mining Development to ensure that the new or proposed Mines and Minerals Act should actually embed the principles of transparency and accountability in line with international best practices.
And obviously contract transparency as well.
African mining vision.
Okay,
yes.
so I mean, I left you for last, Honourable, because you heard the Tafadzwa's comments there. But you're the chairperson of Zimbabwe's Parliament's Mines and Mining Development Committee. Obviously, you have great relationship with Zimbabwe's Mines Ministry. So maybe if you could, has the committee made any recommendations to government on how to make dealings in the mining sector more transparent, more accountable, reducing corruption and so forth? Are there any specific recommendations that you've made to government at all?
Well, what I can say is there's been continuous involvement and interaction, engagement between Parliament and government. As you know, our role is oversight, apart from being representing the communities. But talk about that. Even give me any country, any place that you want, any area that you want in the world. If you talk of a rich community or a community that has embraced 100% transparency and accountability, where 100% the people in that community are well-to-do, are rich, chances are you won't come with any. So I would urge caution, because if we are not cautious, we also, while transparency and accountability is key, but embracing it without assessing the merits and the demerits and the status quo and the environment that is obtaining and the factors that are specific to our country may actually jeopardize our critical success factors and milestones that we have to take. For example, we are now dealing in dollar industry by 2023, and the investors that we talk about, and you know about our situation as a country in terms of relationships, in terms of how we are regarded. We are a beautiful country, a country that is embracing. But unfortunately, in terms of reciprocation from other international players.
But Edmund, you would agree, though. I mean, unfortunately, we do have to finish our show now. But you would agree that any investor coming to the country, knowing that there's transparency, good governance, accountability, and also government slapping down the corruption, which is what government is doing right now, they would feel more inclined to come and invest in the country than less inclined. Would you agree with that?
100%. They'll feel more inclined. But however, I said the ambience.
Yeah, okay.
The situation resonating in Zimbabwe is not reciprocated, and some investors may actually be penalized for dealing
you can
big
see that
business
you can see that this discussion
in Zimbabwe. So we need to proceed with caution.
Okay, I like that. This discussion could actually carry on going because it is getting quite exciting to see how we can make mining contracts more transparent, how we can cut down corruption in the mining sector. I think these are critical aspects, not just in this program, but also to all of us Zimbabweans. Well, we've come to the end of our show this afternoon. You've been watching Contract Transparency in Mining, Opportunities and Challenges for Zimbabwe. We'd like to thank our panelists, Honourable Edmund Mukaratigwa. Thank you, sir, Member of Parliament for Chirugwi South and Parliamentary Chairperson of the Mines and Mining Development Committee. I think there's a lot of mining in Chirugwi South, Honourable. Tafadzwa Chikumbu, Head of Programs at Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ, and Joyce Machiri, Coordinator, Publish What You Pay Zimbabwe, PWYP. Gentlemen, thank you very much for appearing on the program.
Thank you so much.
This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network ZTN and our partners, Transparency International Zimbabwe, TIZ. Well, all that's left for me to say is, I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and you all be safe.